We care very deeply at the Adam Smith Society about cultivating the next generation of free market entrepreneurs, financiers, business leaders, thought leaders, but we also think it's very important to honor current business leaders who understand the centrality of the free market, both in our economic system and in our civic life. And to that end, each year we hand out a Principled Leadership Award to a current business leader who embodies those principles. So I'd like to call to the stage now Manhattan Institute President Larry Mone, who will present this evening's Principled Leadership Award. Larry?
Thank you, everyone. It's an honor to present Cliff Asness with the Adam Smith Society's second annual Principal Leadership Award. The award honors thoughtful business leaders who understand the centrality of the free market in both our economic system and in our civic life. And no one embodies the spirit of this award better than Cliff Asness. Cliff is well known as a quantitative trading pioneer and a very successful investor. His asset management firm, AQR, is one of the world's largest and fastest growing. With degrees from the University of Pennsylvania's Moore Engineering School and the Wharton Business School, and a PhD from the University of Chicago under the tutelage, I might add, of Nobel Prize winner Eugene Fama, his voice is one of the most respected in the finance community. But in addition to running AQR, Cliff is also one of the few business leaders who also takes the time to defend and explain capitalism and make the moral case for markets. He sits on the boards of numerous prestigious journals and publishes many scholarly studies himself, for which he has received a number of awards. Whether it's on the op-ed pages of the nation's most prestigious newspapers, his Cliff's Perspectives blog, or his large Twitter following, Cliff is never shy about explaining how markets function and how they contribute to the well-being of mankind. We've been honored to publish a couple of his articles at City Journal. In one of them, titled Businessmen, Defend Thyself, he noted how business leaders, Democrats and Republicans, need to do more to extol our free enterprise system and not apologize for it. He notes that every time they fail to do so, quote, more voters are lost to the falsehoods of ever bigger government, anti-business hysteria, and class warfare. For his leadership in the investment community and his leadership in educating the public on the virtues of economic liberty, it is our honor to present Cliff Asness with the Adam Smith Society's Principal Leadership Award. Cliff, please come on up. There you go. That's wonderful. That was great. Well deserved. And in a few moments, we'll have Cliff with senior fellow Jim Copland engage in a conversation on economics and public life. Thank you. Okay. Get over here.
Thank you, sir. I asked for Vanessa, but that's okay.
Sorry about that, Cliff, but congratulations on the Principled Leadership Award.
Thank you.
It's very well earned, and before we get into some of the issues themselves, let's talk about your sort of foundations that gave you Principled Leadership. I mean, we're here with a bunch of MBA students. You were at the Wharton School undergrad. You did an MBA, PhD at Chicago at the Booth School. Where was your free market foundation? What gave you these principles? What moved you about free markets?
It was probably the beginning of grad school for me. Before that, I was apolitical, and my family probably would have called ourselves progressive Democrats. Am I okay? We were Long Island Jews. We all were. That was just what we were. So I would have probably said that as just a reflex, but I had never really thought about anything. What's really odd is my views, which have not really, I hope they've evolved and I hope I've learned some stuff, but have not really changed in their core since the beginning of grad school, came when I arrived at Chicago. And if I stopped there, I think you'd imagine, well, I got into Eugene Fama, Nobel laureate's class, or someone else, and I got none of that in class. It was in the air. It was in the water. I somehow knew what the school stood for, and I started reading all the same stuff we all read. There's some Hayek in there. There's some Rand in there. There's some Adam Smith in there. There's some Daniel Steele in there. But I started reading all that kind of in parallel in the beginning. The first political comment I ever heard from one of my senior professors, this was Gene Fama, I think he'd be okay with me telling the story. You kind of knew how he felt. The guy stands for efficient markets. There's not a lot of ambiguity there, but he never said anything till by coincidence I was out to dinner with him in 2008 when Obama won the election, and we're in Chicago. So the rally is taking place and we can hear it. And someone just says to Gene, what should we drink to tonight? And he just goes, pauses, listens, and says, I guess to the death of capitalism. And I'm like, so those rumors are true. You do?
Well, you you actually, I mean, and we'll get to Fama again in a minute, but you actually sort of stepped out pretty early in the Obama administration on this. So you spoke out in principled leadership. You wrote a piece, Unafraid, in Greenwich, Connecticut. After the administration, those who remember, they had the auto bailout, right? And so during the auto bailout, part of what they wanted to do was sort of help the unions out and squeeze the people that had senior debt with the auto companies, and included in those were hedge funds that owned some of this, and so the president came out pretty aggressively against hedge fund industry. And you wrote a piece, provocative piece, and this is really where you launched yourself about 9 years ago into the public debate on this. What prompted you to do that, and what made you unafraid?
Oh, the same thing that motivates all great things: spite and anger. It's a hard, there are some young people here. I don't know if everyone even experienced these times in the business world. It's hard to imagine exactly what 2009, even going into 2010, felt like. There's a lot of privilege, a lot of good things you get from being a business leader. This was not a fun time to be a business leader. In particular, we would call ourselves more of a regular old money manager who does some hedge funds, but we do hedge funds also. It was really odd to have this group blamed kind of for the financial crisis. I mean, there is an argument, and I could take the other side of this in a heartbeat, but there's an argument about major banks. There's certainly an argument about the whole mortgage industry. The notion that the hedge fund world caused a nickel of this is a little, no one was even making that seriously, but they're the easy whipping boy. If you want to yell at people and get some sympathy, particularly from your side, yell at hedge fund managers. So Chrysler was in their bankruptcy, and you guys know what a bankruptcy is. It's complicated. Everyone has different claims, and you got to negotiate and figure out who has what. He strongly castigated, yelled at, used the bully pulpit to tell hedge funds they're not being patriotic. They should come make a good deal for the pension plan, which is really the unions that support him. And I wrote what I didn't think, sometimes it's inadvertent when you get some fame. I didn't think this was as fiery a piece at the time. I still don't, but I kind of get it. I wrote a piece just explaining, everyone uses the term fiduciary nowadays. And even if you're not literally a fiduciary, I hope most investors act like one. That means you act in your investors' best interest. The piece was this simple. We'd love to help you out, Mr. President. It's against the law. If I have your money and Obama thinks that I should be nice to the unions, I can't go, well, you've hired me to do as best as I can for you, but I'm going to give a little to the union. I'm going to give a lot to the union. Even if I agreed, you can't do that. And it was part of more just fighting back. And it was one of these weird things where I did not think I wrote something that aggressive. And suddenly, two things went on. People were kind of giving me the thumbs up, and they were doing it very quietly. And that's a scary, what's really scary? When people start congratulating you and thanking you for being brave. And you don't think you're being brave. You suddenly go, am I doing something scary here? So that's, and then I got the bug. I don't do it as much. I will still do it. I'm not retired from it. But for a few years after, I don't know, it was both recreation for me, kind of a weird, cathartic recreation, if for want of a better phrase. And there was a time when the right was actually somewhat, or the defenders of free enterprise were somewhat cowed. So I felt another voice was needed. I think there's enough nowadays. We have City Journal. We had it back then. So,
well, one of the reasons I think you guys were whipping boys is you make a lot of money, right? And I want to
some of the days.
So I want to sort
today.
of ask you about the theory here, because you're a PhD under Gene Fama, as you said, and Ken French. We had dinner with Ken French. Ken French is Fama's co-author and all this efficient market stuff. He taught me finance, and basically
he's thrilled you went into law. Sorry, I didn't even talk to him about this.
The basic premise behind the efficient market hypothesis is, well, you're not going to be able to make money on this. These markets are efficient. Trying to
Sure.
do this, et cetera. And then you come along, studying under these guys, and say, hey, wait a minute. I'm going to do this quantitative analysis that's premised on inefficiencies in the market, and you've done quite well at it. So how did you get into that, studying under these folks, and what's made it successful?
Well, for one thing, I'm glad you asked, because I think a lot of the world, particularly about Gene, but in general about the efficient market viewpoint, which may actually be down to just Gene. So I think people believe he and that group is more dogmatic than they are. I don't remember if it's a second or third class. I took his class and I TA'd it for the next 2 years. I should remember this. But there's some point very early in the class that he says flat out, and he knows it's going to shock new students, markets are definitely not perfectly efficient. And only at the University of Chicago would this get kind of a, everyone sits up. Like normal world, people either don't know what you're talking about, 99.9%, or think, yeah, we know that. But his point is always that perfect efficiency is a very extreme hypothesis. I think Gene would say something I would agree with in a second. I know I'm in a friendly room here, but I would say it in an unfriendly room. Markets are far more efficient than pretty much any other way we've thought about how to allocate resources and capital, but they're not perfect. I wrote my dissertation for Gene on a very simple strategy, trading based on momentum. It's this stupid. You buy what's been going up lately, 6 to 12 months. You sell what's been going down lately. A few things. It works a little more often than it doesn't. In my world of quant and statisticians, we like to say a strategy works. If your mechanic said your car worked the same way, you would fire your mechanic very quickly, because your car should work every day or at least most days. Good strategies work slightly more than half the days, and over 100 years we go, we're pretty sure this is true. There's an edge. It also worked best combined with Fama and French's work. They had studied, among other things, value investing, systematic buying cheap and sell expensive, and these worked very nicely together. I would have written that way anyway, because I think it's true, but it also helped graduate that I wasn't fighting them. But from the beginning, momentum, it was terrifying to ask Gene if I could write this dissertation. That's what you kind of do. You go to your professor you're close with and you go, I got an idea for a dissertation. What do you think of this? And I told him, I want to write a dissertation on momentum. I've done some of the preliminary work. And then I swear to God, I mumbled the second part. And I find it works really well. Because it's a very Chicago dissertation to study this trading rule people on Wall Street use and say, ha, doesn't work. People are wasting their time again. I said it to him. I actually still get a little touched by this. He looked at me and he just goes, if it's in the data, write the dissertation. And it was in the data. Fama and French regularly refer to this as the greatest embarrassment to the efficient markets hypothesis out there. If you can French any day, and if you catch Gene on the right day, they will tell you, yeah, markets aren't perfect, and they think momentum is picking up parts of it. Some of this gets very angel on the head of a pin. People like me spend a lot of time arguing about why that value strategy works, why cheap beats expensive. Some think it's for the reason you alluded to, that markets are imperfect and there are errors. Some think that cheap things are riskier. And that could be reconciled with an efficient market. So we haven't even fully given up the ghost that some of the ways we aren't making money is simply harvesting a rational risk premium. But if you push me, I would say, yeah, behavioral finance has some truth to it. Markets aren't perfectly efficient. They're still the best way to organize a society, but someone's got to be trying to beat them just a little bit.
Let's start going into some specific policy points here. And one of your spats in your blogging days was with another great, well-known investor, Warren Buffett, who under the
one-way spat. He doesn't respond to me. It's like fighting with a mountain. It's very humbling. You yell at the mountain just ignores it.
Well, Mr. Buffett, of course, during the Obama years was arguing about taxes and saying how he paid higher tax rates than his secretary and all this. And he said, I, as an investor... paid lower tax rates than his secretary. His secretary had higher than he did. And saying, I've never, as an investor, paid attention to taxes. You took him on with that.
Yeah.
So why did you take him on with that? And then we'll get to the tax law that just passed.
All right, let me first say the requisite. The man is a genius when it comes to investing. I took him on with it because he's a frickin' liar when it comes to taxes. I was assured this would all be off the record. No, I don't give a damn. He literally would say things in support of higher taxes, like different tax rates have never affected an investment decision, a rational investment decision. A lot of people here, this is organized around MBA programs. When you take a class on how to decide to do a project, you build usually a spreadsheet. You calculate what's called an NPV. If it's positive, you do the project. If it's negative, you don't. If it's taxed at 100%, you generally don't do it. And there's no magic at 100. Projects that are attractive will become more attractive at lower tax rates. The man has organized his entire life around avoiding taxes. It doesn't affect investment decisions, but it does affect that you only get capital gains, you don't pay a dividend, and you leave all your money to a charitable foundation. That's all it affects. So again, anger and spite sometimes gets you going. A lot of us, I hope I don't do this, but maybe I do. When you don't have your political hat on, you're doing what you're really good at, you can be coldly rational. And maybe we all get a little crazy when we get too much of a political hat on. But he's in a position to influence a lot of people. And he gets all folksy and says things that are false when he gets his political hat on.
Well, let's talk about the specific tax bill, because we just had, the end of last year, what I would say is the biggest tax reform bill in more than 3 decades. What do you think about it? What did it get right? What did it get wrong?
It got a lot right. I actually wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal complaining about one part of it, which makes it, though in there we said we got a lot right. The biggest thing it got right was the headline piece, lowering the corporate tax rate. That's been a bipartisan goal. That's, prior to politics going absolutely nuts, even pre-Trump, but in the last, 2 to 6 years, that was a bipartisan thing. People said, hey, we used to be cheap. We're now about the most expensive developed place in the world. We probably have to be at least middle of the road. We did a little better than that. But so that was easy, easy to like. The part that I do think is messy and probably not so great is the pass-through deduction section. I didn't think we had to make it that complicated. Let me give full disclosure. I tried to get them to include investment managers for that treatment and failed. I would not, I swear to it, because I literally said in meetings to politicians, I don't think anyone should get this. But if anyone gets it, I don't get why architects are getting it, but investment managers aren't. And I stand behind that statement. Apparently that was not very, this was a great example of politics. This was a Mr. Whoever goes to Washington. I'm naive. I think just because every meeting I walk out of I think everyone involved with the decision, everyone absolutely agreed with me that somehow it was going to go my way. That was not the case. Ken Griffin won this award last year, right? Ken and I'm gonna get in such trouble here. We did some of these meetings together, and it was actually kind of fun because usually when I'm alone in a meeting, I'm at best medium cop and often bad cop. When we did these meetings together, I was good cop by like this much. I'd be like, well, if no one gets it, it's fine. He'd be like, you're giving Jamie Dimon a break, and we're not getting it. So I do think, irrespective of Mone, and you can read the journal article, I think that's going to create a cottage industry and exactly what we want to avoid, all kinds of machinations to get out. But lower taxes and the lower corporate, on net, this bill is a big positive. And not to be too partisan, but the left's assertion that it's a giveaway to the rich isn't true, except to the extent that if you cut everyone's taxes even a little, rich people have more dollar savings. That math seems to upset them. It's very hard to get around that math.
Let's shift gears a little bit. There are going to be more on this tomorrow, so I don't want to go too much into the weeds, but we just heard Michael Anton talking about the president's trade policy. This is something where he's departed from some traditional conservative Republican orthodoxy, something you've been critical of. So I guess I would infer that your take on what the president's done with trade is a bit different than Michael's. Tell us a little bit what you think.
Well, I'm a big fan of Michael Anton's. I'm less of a fan of Donald Trump than Michael Anton is. And that's nervous laughter. I can feel it. On trade, part of it is almost being an academic economist. Maybe I care about stuff other people don't care that much about. But when he repeatedly says, and it's not just you, a few people in his administration say it, that any trade deficit is equivalent to a loss. If we have a trade deficit of $10, if we import something for $10, we have lost $10. There's no economist of any political stripe who is not going nuts at that. No, we didn't. We got the stuff. We gave them money and we got the stuff. You can come up with all kinds of simple examples. If there's a country we just opened up to the world and they want to consume nothing, but they produce something unique and wonderful that we all want, and they start selling it to us. Well, first of all, I already have a logical fallacy. They must want some of our stuff because they got to do something with that money we gave them. Let's skip that for a second because he doesn't get that either. But that country coming into existence makes us way better off, even if we suddenly have a trade deficit. Now, the response I get from some, which is a response I actually like, is he doesn't really believe that stuff. This is all negotiating. He has to be, and I'm not being obnoxious here, credibly insane to get people to move. And if at the end of this, we end up with better trade, freer trade, it's distinctly possible that with all the anti-free trade rhetoric, we end up with freer trade because we scare the crap out of the Chinese and Mexico and whatnot, and they cave a bit to us. And the president is not wrong that a lot of these countries are actually considerably more protectionist than we are. He is wrong that trade hurts us even with protectionist countries. Again, if a country says, I will not buy anything from you whatsoever, it's still the case that if we buy anything from them, it's because we think we're better off. So he's wrong that it makes us worse off, but he's not wrong if his whole goal is to get us to a better place. I have my doubts, but in a positive world, and this certainly could be true, it's all, and he's Mr. Deal. If this is part of a deal, then it's brilliant. If not, it just is bad economics.
Let's before we open up for questions, let's close with one more. Do something a little fun. When Michael was up here, Vanessa talked to him about the president's penchant for Twitter and the inability of his staff to control him, etc. You recently rejoined Twitter, I suppose. You'd abandoned an account before, but over the years you've been vocal, and I've got some favorite quotes from you. If a Keynesian and a Luddite married and had a very, very slow-witted child, he'd be you. Talking about Bill Gates' idea, another mountain
of tax robots.
Taxing robots. And when you commented on why a facelift costs less than knee replacement, you said the markets work, government doesn't, and when government fails, the market gets blamed. Good system. What are some of your favorite Twitter battles, and how do you enjoy this communication?
My favorite Twitter battles are one way, I admit. I do like to torture Mr. Paul Krugman. I don't call him by name. I refer to him as the former economist. He has written kind of nasty stuff about me, not on Twitter. He's only recently joined Twitter. But I have been mentioned in a Krugman article. That's wonderful. I love that. And, you know, there are people who disagree with us, who are wonderful people, who are principled. I don't think he's one of them. I think he's just a bad guy. The Twitter battles I've actually had, this is partly why I occasionally leave Twitter and I occasionally take Twitter breaks. To be honest, the Twitter battles I've actually had, I regret, because I generally get too mad. I have a short temper and an okay sense of humor. So when I think something's funny, especially if I'm mad, the chance of me not typing it is very, very small. And you know, then someone else types something back, and pretty soon you and a tenured professor from Berkeley are calling each other, you know, all right, I'll meet you in Wichita and we'll settle this once and for all, something like that. So the actual battles I've had, I've gotten much better about this. Largely, I often post and then don't read the comments on my posts. Ignorance is so blissful in these cases. And even worse than Twitter, I know many people in the room like me have published articles. Never read the comment section on the internet. That waylays madness.
I agree with that. As someone's written a lot of comments that get on the internet. Why don't we start lining up here and we'll get some questions from our MBA students in the audience. We'll start here. Identify yourself and identify your school, please, and keep it in the form of a question.
Evening, Peter Grace from UCLA Anderson. Wanted to understand your vision for the Applied Liberty Chair for Jonah Goldberg at AEI, and will you be joining the Remnant podcast with Jonah anytime soon?
We got to start a write-in campaign. He has to invite me. What he's referring to is my wife and I just endowed a chair at the American Enterprise Institute for Jonah Goldberg. I will tell you that I wish I had some more subtle explanation other than just like Manhattan, we think they're a great organization, and I love Jonah Goldberg. He's become a personal friend. So it was a vehicle for giving to them that meant a little more to me personally. The only thing that's vaguely amusing is the name of the chair. The Jonah Goldberg's in the Asness chair of Applied Liberty. Does anyone here follow? I imagine a fair amount of this room must follow Jonah Goldberg in some way, right? This is not got to be a statistician. This is not a normal room. If you gather a couple hundred normal New Yorkers and go Jonah Goldberg to them, it doesn't work that well. But coming up with a chair that would make sense for him is really, really hard. He's cross-disciplinary. He writes on politics, some economics, some social issues, all with a lot of humor and tons of obscure television references. So Applied Liberty was, I think, accurate and as specific as I could possibly get. The funny part is, of course, the intention is it will live on after Jonah and be the chair of someone where we could have come up with a much better name for, but so be it. Thank you.
Go over to this side.
Hi, thank you for being here tonight. My name is Austin Lewis, and I'm part of the Baylor University chapter. Go Bears. And I'm wondering, you said on net you think the tax bill was a good idea, but what are your thoughts on how that's going to grow the federal deficit? Do you believe the CBO's GDP projections, are you a believer that we'll grow our way out of the deficit? I'm curious how you can,
I do not think we'll grow our way out of the deficit. All political parties tell lies. And our side likes to exaggerate the growth benefits of tax cuts. I once did a cartoon that no one liked, but it was the Laffer curve as seen by different parties. And the point was largely that to Democrats, it's a vertical line. You just said it just keeps going up. To Republicans, to supply side Republicans, it's always well past the tipping point. The Laffer curve is an obviously true thing. Sometimes you get attacked if you say that publicly, as if you said you're a witch. It is true, but where you are on it is extremely arguable. And taxes in this country are actually high now. They're not particularly low, but they're not Laffer curve levels. So I do think that if you do what's called static scoring, that's woefully wrong. I think the economy will be stronger because of the tax bill, and it will cost less than it seems. I don't think it's self-financing. The deficit, I am concerned, but the way I would address it is the obvious one, is from the spending side. I think making incentives better, which they did across the board to invest and to grow businesses, that's the right thing to do. Spending is the problem on the deficit. Unfunded mandates are the problem in the deficit. So I am concerned, and marginally more concerned after this tax bill, but I think that is largely an almost completely different war to fight. But great question.
Over here.
Asness. My name is David Mosulidze. I'm an MBA from Columbia. Concurrently, I'm a macrostrategist at Stifel Nicholas. Two questions for you. What do you like most about investing and why? And second, what's the difference between running an investment business versus actual investment process?
I'll tell you what I like and hate about running, about investing. And they're both the same thing. You get a report card every day. And it's not so trite that I like it on days with the report card's green and I hate it on days the report card it's red, though there's at least some truth to that. It is a field where, there are a lot of fields where you just never get a report card. It's always kind of amorphous. Now, our report card has a lot of statistical noise to it. You get one, but there's randomness. It also makes it something that I get very frustrated with on occasion. Even very good investment processes, even Warren Buffett's investment process has had horrible 3-year streaks. So I think what I like and hate are fairly similar. I never quite thought of it that way before. I'll be in analysis over this next week. The difference between running an investment process and running real life investments is night and day. I think you probably knew that in asking the question. The example I like to use is we started our firm in late '98, kind of minutes before the technology bubble. I look around this room, it's really annoying how young people are. This is by definition a young group, so that shouldn't really shock me. But this happened when you were in junior high school. The technology stocks went nuts to a level that I still think is the craziest pricing for a big segment of the market we've ever seen since maybe the 20s or 30s. And even there, it's arguable because the data gets a little weirder. We got killed by that in our first year and a half. I mentioned value and momentum. There are only two of the things we do. There are others, but they are two of the biggies. Just imagine this, to keep it simple. Momentum, as you can imagine in a bubble, had a pretty good year and a half. Value had an epically, horribly, world-class, never seen before, terrible year and a half. Now let's do some math here. Average pretty good with epically horrible, never seen before, world-class, terrible. The average of those two is not very good. So to start out that way was very hard. We stuck to it. I'm actually proud of this period. We wrote things defending it, but we stuck to our investment process. And we have things that go up for 40 years, down in the very beginning of what we do, and then back up, and life's good again. Here's the difference. When you build a theoretical investment process, and it could be a really good one, it seems you look at it and go, anyone would want this. It has a few dips along the way. They're only a year and a half, of course. Living through that. At one point near the end of the technology bubble, my partner looked at me and said, "You look like Abe Lincoln after the Civil War." I started out the tech bubble, with hair. It wasn't all gray, stuff like that. I think I responded to him hopefully pretty quickly, but it's not a great comparison. He shouldn't be making that comparison. I'm like, yeah, Lincoln kept the Union together and ended slavery, I stuck with value. Most people don't consider these equal, but I appreciated the compliment, even if he meant it as a shot at my appearance. But they are very different. Thank you.
Over here.
Yours, Abhishek from NYU. You spoke
You
about
hear that, girls? Big fan. my girls are here.
yeah. You spoke about fiduciary
I have
duty.
one.
Well, I wrote about you in my midterm yesterday. So you spoke about fiduciary duty and increasing
About what?
fiduciary duty
Yeah, yeah.
on the investment management industry. How might that apply to robo-advisors? And do you think robo-advisors may take away market share from active management in the future?
Yeah, I do. It's very hard. When we say robo, when we say quant, even artificial intelligence, that covers a very broad range of different investing activities. What we do is quantitative. We don't consider it artificial intelligence, though we are experimenting with some of those things. Robo is an ill-defined term at this point. You get the sense that there's quant work behind it, but exactly where that fits in the spectrum, we're talking about something that the world hasn't even defined particularly well. But I think this stuff is less new than many other people think. I think most of these things are people like us and others taking standard old investing. When I mention value and momentum, I'll tell you a few of the other things we look for. Long-term profitable stocks that are low risk in terms of both earnings and returns. You can just look at the data for this. We're looking at the past. So we're looking for cheap stocks that are starting to valued, that are starting to get better momentum, that make a lot of money, and don't move around a scary amount. When you go look at what a lot of traditional managers look for, it's not that different. We're doing it systematically. So I see a lot of the quant and the robo side of investing as, yeah, it has ramifications, but it is exactly what's going on in a lot of the rest of the economy. There'll be parts that will never be quantized, robotized. I don't think of a good word. Automated. We have an actual word for it. I don't need to make one up. But the parts that can be automated should be, because then you can deliver to the client cheaper and possibly more well-defined. So I do think it's going to change the investing world in a lot of ways. We've yet to see it and see how it's going to play out. So far, I think we're changing the investing world mostly by doing the same thing good investors have always done, just doing it cheaper and more systematically, which I think is something that's often misunderstood, that we're doing something crazy new. I wish it were crazy new. It would be more fun and more unique.
Over here.
Hi, Dr. Asness. I'm Catherine Dextres. I'm from Rice.
She called me doctor. Nobody does that. That's cool. Sorry.
Just trying to be deferential. So I'm really excited to see you in person. I've heard your interviews with Barry Ritholtz, so thank you very much for being here. My question for you is a little bit more about the free flow of information. So a lot of market efficiency depends on that. I'd like to know what you think the role of government, or if there is a role of government in ensuring that with regulation. Do you think things like the SEC work?
Now I am really scared if it's on the record. Well, as brave as I like to say I am not going to sit here and tell you the SEC does not work. They audit us, and I'm terrified of them. Look, in almost any argument, I will almost reflexively take the free market side of the argument. Let me give you a wishy-washy, cowardly, but accurate answer. The laws and the regulations I am least offended by have to do with disclosure and information. Even there, I would often come down on the side of the market will sort this out and do it well. But if we have to have laws, and I think we're going to have a few. If we have to have laws, those are the ones I dislike least, or even like on occasion. So put me down as the most backhanded compliment ever for those laws. But yeah, I think the government has a role there. And if they stuck to that and didn't actually tell us what to do, but just told us we all have to disclose more and more, I think that would actually be I'd sign for that détente in a heartbeat.
Down to one more question. Sorry about that. We're going to go over here for the final.
Hi, Cliff. I have
You're still going to stand up, even though you're not getting a question.
The mic guy.
That's cool.
He's the mic
Good.
guy.
Now go on.
He's one of ours.
I like the perseverance. I'll answer your question afterwards for that.
First of all, I thank you, Manhattan Institute and Adam Smith Society, for doing this type of event, because my question is about kind of the complete lack of diversity among higher education institutions about their political views. It's so leaning towards one direction. Like my institution, University of Pennsylvania, for example, just funded retirement plan for the least competent and effective vice president and senator in history. So, and it's just like so natural, people love it, and we have no idea what he's doing with all this funding. So my question is there any way for you to think about kind of helping the direction reverse? And I'm really concerned about long-term productivity of U.S. economy, given how everybody is thinking market is wrong, that we have to adopt socialism.
Are you asking me if I can move universities back to the center from the far left?
Yeah.
I'm mainly just going to commiserate. I, like many of us in this room, I think it's a huge problem. Speaking of Twitter, I don't know if anyone else subscribes. I subscribe to I'm going to get the name, not precisely right, but close. The New Peer Review. This is a Twitter feed that puts out abstracts from the social sciences. They're actually real papers. I won't quote one of them because any one of them, the fact that I think it's ridiculous, will offend someone. You got to stay away from specifics in these arguments because they'll. But these abstracts are nuts. You read them going, are these serious, real people? Myself, just as a donor, I've started directing more of what I do to places like Jonathan Haidt's Heterodox Academy, a few others. We brought together a group of like-minded donors. I wish they came from the left also, but they were largely from the right because we really focus more on free speech rather than altering the center of speech. I do think if we focus on free speech, we will naturally do better. That the anti-free speech is being directed currently at us, which has a great irony if you look at liberalism's history. But I'll just tell you this. I share your worry. I don't have optimistic, happy words about it. It's a deep worry, and it's very hard to fix. I've started to get into trying to do my share to fix it. Thank you.